People who worked in restaurants. What was the worst customer that you had to deal with? I worked in Domino's. I had a guy throw a handful of pennies at me while laughing. The 30-odd cents was my tip. He was mad when I turned around and walked away without picking any of them up. His exact words were, "Oh, my money not good enough for you? Fine. I'll never order Domino's again." I've never had a customer fire themselves like that before. It was great. I love when the "I'll never come back" threat comes out. Like you think my salary is at all affected by you coming in. Please never come back, it's one less person to yell at me. Yep, they think we will come groveling. I always respond with a cheery "alright. Have a good day," and that makes them even more mad. I had a manager who used to tell people "I insist that you don't" whenever they'd pull that shit. It was fantastic. I used to work in a bar that sold very old booze. A drunk man tried to impress his friends by chugging from a bottle of Mero from the early 60s. He had to pay for the whole thing since his lips touched it and it was useless. Cost him around $800. Had he poured it into his mouth, would he have loopholed out of this? The scientific term is waterfalling. Barista here had a guy that regularly came in and ordered a complicated drink. He always finished the order by asking for a finger swirl in the drink. If you gave him a confused look, he would say, "Well, how else am I gonna taste you?" He was the worst. Oh god, I had a similar dude when I was in college. Said to me to stick my finger into the beer bottle so he could taste something sweet. Mayo. Worked at a deli once. Guy asked for vagina ham on purpose and would say he liked the taste. Virginia ham. That's the grossest thing I've ever heard. Considering your name, I'd say you don't shy away from the gross. At this same deli, a girl I worked with came to me with a weird request. I asked to taste or smell this freshly opened Best's roast beef. I smell it. It's horrid. Now this was at least $80 worth of meat, so I had to taste test it first. I nearly threw up. Just as I'm printing out the throw out tag, she tells me she sold a pound to a customer. I told her to flag the guy down. The guy, in short, was confused because he too taste tested the meat and thought it was fine and asked why she needed it back. Her reply, "Sir, it tastes and smells like dirty rotten vaginas." His reply, "Oh well, I thought it tasted familiar." EWW. Worked in a popular restaurant for a while. We usually have quite a long wait, 30-40 minutes waits during dinner service, and people are told by the hosts about this. There was this lady that got fed up with the wait after 10 minutes. She stormed into the restaurant, stood next to a table of 4 people and literally asked them, "Are you guys done? We've been waiting for a long time now and would like to have the table if you guys are just chatting." Was completely mind blown how people are able to not give a fuck and pull something like this in public. What did the table say? Personally, I'd have ordered more food. We haven't even had dessert yet. You mean my second entree? Work in a place that is frequented by local families and youth sports teams. On Sundays, this one large group of people always come in, and they are the worst. The parents drink and ignore their preteens who run around playing games in the entire restaurant, disrupting everyone else. They have tried to walk in a party of 45 during end of year sports party season when we are booked solid and get mad that there isn't enough space for them. And they modify everything like crazy and leave zero in a tip. It's at least once a month the entire group comes in, and weekly for some of the individual families. This is the reason many restaurants have an automatic gratuity on parties above a certain size. One large party can steal a server's entire evening, and having them not tip is painful. We are a walk up toward a place which makes the gratuity thing impossible. Well, that's no good. If I was the manager, I would speak to the group and say, "I noticed the past few times you visited you haven't left a tip for your server. Was there something wrong with the service you received?" At the very least, they will need to admit they don't tip. Way back in the 80s, I worked in a restaurant that was a favorite of a celebrity chef of those days, Jeff Smith, the frugal gourmet. Never seen a bigger shat than that guy. Literally make our servers cry. Nothing was ever right. He was beyond rude and condescending, yet he kept coming back. He had a reputation of being a jerk off camera, Eventually he was disgraced by being outed as a child predator and was quickly forgotten by all. Our restaurant was a good place. Another celebrity chef of the time, Graham Kerr, the galloping gourmet, was always a pleasure to have visit. In his day, Graham Kerr had the energy level of Gordon Ramsay, the health consciousness of Paula Deen, and the gleeful euphoria of man well acquainted with ecstasy. He was fun to watch. The best part was always him sitting down to eat what had cooked. That rapt silence in the studio as he savors the plate. Then the whispering approval when he eventually puts the forkful in his mouth and declares delicious, and how he'd grab someone from the audience and bring them to the table. Food is always better when shared. After a wedding reception ended at our facility, we were cleaning, and I began the cleaning process on our espresso machine. The party was over almost a half hour already. The process takes 12 minutes. People were still there as the party slowly let out, and the father of the bride asks me for an espresso. I told him I could get it to him, as we have a strict policy of always trying to satisfy our guests' needs, but the machine was cleaning, and it would be done in about 10 minutes. He begins ranting about how much he paid for the wedding, and stormed to our banquets manager, and told them I refused to make it for him. Manager is at bag and starts ripping me in front of the guy. I show both of them that the machine is just finishing the cleaning process, and it was impossible to make it beforehand. I got suspended for 2 weeks. Our bar was having a private party. A drunk dude walks in and orders a drink. I knew he wasn't with the party based on his attire, and that he came in every so often. I told him I couldn't get him a drink. He lost his mind, told me to fuck off, and then wanted to fight me. On his way out he yelled that we should put up signs. As he walked by the signs on the door saying we were closed for a private event, he came in the next day sober and apologized. Had a man and his wife come in during a really busy lunch rush. He was rude off the bat, interrupting me, not wanting to listen to me speak. Whatever. It happens all the time. He was very adamant that he wanted both chips and salsa and a plate of roasted wings as appetizers. He kept emphasizing that he wanted them together before they ordered their lunch, even though chips and salsa only take a minute and wings take about 12. I rang them in together because of how he ordered them. In hindsight, I should have made completely sure. But, not 3 minutes later, the man is waving at my coworker across the restaurant, yelling at her about how they've been there for 30 minutes and his appetizer is taking too long, and he wants it before his wings. I was at a party table, so she ran back and grabbed the chips and the wings, which were somehow up as well, and brought them out. He took one bite of a wing and tossed the plate like a frisbee across the table towards her and started complaining about them being cold. I rush over to see what's going on, and he starts yelling at me, saying his food is awful and this is the worst service he's ever gotten in his life. I don't do well with grown men yelling at me, so I went to the kitchen and my manager went out and thankfully had my back as much as he could, and made the guy pay for the wings and the chips and then leave. After he left, I started to clean the table, where I found the single penny he tipped me with that my coworker promptly threw in the trash, and got a call from my general manager asking why a man had called me professionally challenged on Yelp. Some people are just the worst and make everyone else feel like shit no matter what. Bartending in a restaurant a few years ago, there was a private party and one of the guests asked me to plug in his iPhone to listen to a song. No big deal. I did it, and he tipped me $20. He left his phone behind the bar and got wasted. When he was leaving I said, "Sir, don't forget about your phone." He threw a beer on me and told me to leave him the fuck alone, and told me get a real job. Guess who got to keep a nice new iPhone? We had someone do a runner once, and they left their phone. Reasonably expensive one, although this was over 10 years ago, so I can't remember if they were as much as they are now. He sheepishly came back the next day asking if one had been handed in. Our boss said no, and kept the phone. We had that happen all the time too. When the jerk would come back the next day looking for their phone, the manager would say, "Let me go check in the office. In the meantime you can close out your $100 tab from last night too." If the guy paid the $100 he'd get his phone. If he refused to pay, the phone was never found. Not exactly doing God's work, but at least it's some consolation for dealing with rude drunk assholes who disrespect the employees of the bar. A local bar does something similar to this. So many people would leave before closing their tabs and would leave the bar without their credit/debit cards. The manager couldn't batch out with so many tabs open, and overall it was just a mess. The owner got tired of tracking these people down on Facebook in good faith to 1. Return their card, and 2. Ask permission to close out their tab. Only to later get the charge back. He put up a sign that all cards left with open tabs were subjected to a 20% fee on top of the unpaid bill, and that we are no longer running after you to give you your card back. A customer ordered one of our daily specials and didn't like it. So instead of complaining to me about the food and letting me offer something else, she complained to my manager about me. This was May of last year. In August of last year, turns out she was one of my college professors for the semester, teaching a management course. She recognized me the first day, but I played it off like I didn't know her. Edit. She did not complain about me to my manager in front of me. I left to go work an event in a different building, and she left a sticky note for me after talking to my boss. I don't know what the sticky note said, since I didn't bother to read it. I'll never understand why people make their dislike for a restaurant's food into a bizarre personal grudge against the server. I worked at a place that had good food except for this one dish, steak fries. It was a small hanger steak, cut into strips, served with fries. That's it. The steak was always tough, under-seasoned, and wasn't a lot of food for the money. One day a guy asked me for some recommendations, so I made a couple. He apparently wasn't impressed by my suggestions, so he asked about the steak fries and said, explicitly, that I wouldn't recommend it. So that's what he ordered. After taking a couple of bites, he pushed the plate away, then asked me to call over the manager. He then complained to the manager, not directly about the food, but about me for giving him an awful recommendation. I had a guy that was a germaphobe and had really bad OCD. He came through before, and my coworker didn't want to deal with him. So I went to the drive-through window after washing my hands. I cashed out the order that was on screen, and he reluctantly handed over his card. I gave him the coffee that I cashed him out for. He started yelling at me saying that it was wrong. Apparently the person that took the order forgot to type it in. Unfortunate, but it happens. He started yelling at the coworker that didn't want to take his order at the window. So instead of just saying that it was the wrong order, getting refunded and being on his way, he stayed in the driveway for 20 minutes telling my coworker that she was stupid and unprofessional and was unfit to be a supervisor. He kept demanding that we get the phone number of our franchise owner, but apparently the number was wrong, and he kept yelling at us. But when we came back to the window after 20 minutes of this, he left. My supervisor went into the back to cry. I felt so bad for her. She's the sweet person. Fast forward less than a month later, he called the store to apologize, and the manager made sure that my coworker never dealt with him again, but he could come in as long as he didn't make a scene. He told the manager that his therapist told him he should apologize. He spent a combined total of 3 hours on the phone with the manager, where he apologized and also blamed us for making him late to his appointment that day, and at the end of the phone call, he asked if we were hiring. But that last line, though, happens all the damn time. We have a regular at work who it's awful to staff, and I do mean awful. She's taken to berating us for why she never gets a response to her job applications. I can't imagine, lady. I worked at a Vietnamese restaurant back in high school, and I had a Viet family come in to eat. They gave me snobby vibe the entire time, especially after I told them I couldn't speak Vietnamese. They ordered regular pho, but asked for no cilantro. So I rang the order in with no cilantro. It came out with cilantro in it, and I told the kitchen what the family asked. The kitchen told me they couldn't do anything about it. So I told my manager, and they told me to ask the family if they still wanted it. Family said yes, so I brought it out, and they took out the cilantro and ate the entire thing. At the end of the meal they spoke to the owner and complained how I got their order completely wrong, got the food for free, and got their bill taken out of my pay. The owner told me I should remove the cilantro myself. Shitty management. Shitty customer. Fast food near a high school. The absolute worst were the moms. Had one who came in weekly and screamed about wrong orders or whatever complaint she could dream up so she could get free food for her entire family. Then you get the loser douches who think harassing employees is funny. The absolute worst customer was the owner of the franchise. He'd walk in, test employees and then fire someone for some issue so minor it was likely just made up. This old guy who asked if I was included in the order. I'm 17. This happened to me when I was about that age. Some guy asked if I was on the dessert menu. I pretended so hard not to understand him that he actually got embarrassed, left a generous tip, and politely left without another word. That backfire. I guess you could say that revenge is a dish best served for dessert. Edit, you know why. Revenge is a dish best served in accordance with food safety standards and best practices.